over what is happening. I want to get back with you, Einat Wilf, to the strong words we heard from the Israeli Prime Minister, who's having a dinner in London this Wednesday with his British counterpart. Is it a victory for terrorism?
I think it's yet difficult to tell where this will head. I mean, on one hand, actually, this certainly is a positive move in the sense that the Palestinians are answering to popular demands. This was something that Palestinians wanted very much. They wanted to see unity government. For us Israelis also, it's very important that once, hopefully, we get back to negotiating, that we negotiate with a partner that actually can represent the Palestinian people. And should an agreement be signed, we can be sure that they will stand behind it, and there will not be any splinter groups who say, well, we don't agree with what you've just signed. So in that respect, it could be a positive move. The concern, of course, is that any agreement between Hamas and Fatah, assuming that they need to compromise in one way or the other, is likely to move their positions further away from peaceful positions. Assuming that Hamas has not completely allowed itself to become Fatah, to go in that direction, then any compromise between the two is likely to take us perhaps quite a few steps away from peace, and that is the concern.
We also see, by the way, that there are some divisions over how to react within the Israeli camp. You alluded to them a moment ago. The Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz has this Wednesday published excerpts from a report delivered earlier this week by diplomats to Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, which sees this as an opportunity. Instead of counseling blanket opposition to a Palestinian unity government, the authors of the report recommend that Israel adopt a constructive approach that would sharpen the dilemma on the Palestinian side regarding the aims of such a government and Hamas's unwillingness to recognize Israel. And I have to ask you this question. Can you translate for us, please? When Benjamin Netanyahu says, this is a great day for terrorism. Sorry, those weren't the exact words.
Those were not the words.
But when he says that, is that what he believes? Or is that playing to the gallery?
No, it's not playing to the gallery. Certainly, he's very concerned. We are all very concerned. I'm generally of the approach that you should give people the benefit of the doubt. I can see the positive aspect of this element, as discussed earlier, the possibility of having a consensus government and a single representative. But you cannot ignore, and you've shown the way that Hamas responded to the killing of bin Laden. I mean, you cannot ignore the history of Hamas as a terrorist organization. You cannot ignore the fact that they continue to use violence against civilians, that they continue to, they refuse to recognize the right of the Jewish people to have their own state. They do not accept the idea that they should respect previous agreements that were signed with Israel. So certainly what the Prime Minister reflects is one concern. I do believe that it's important at least to give the benefit of the doubt. While it is possible that things will not go well, we should at least this is for the Palestinians to decide. This is their government. It's clear, of course, now that the world in general, as well as Israel, would be watching very closely, perhaps reading very closely into the signs going forward. For example, the makeup of the government. That's going to send a very important signal. Is Fayyad, whom you brought earlier, who's a very moderate person, who's actually, in my view, the first person who actually focuses on building a Palestinian state rather than destroying the Israeli one, is he going to stay in government? And if he doesn't...
We're going to get to that point in a moment. The issue of security between the Israelis and the Palestinians coming to a head. And yet, at the same time, we've seen that the truce has been extended. Do you see Israelis in the short term, being safer or less safe as a result of today's deal?
It really depends ultimately on how the two, both Fatah and Hamas, decide to conduct themselves. Fatah has understood that for the Palestinian people to thrive, they need security. They have done very important work on creating a secure West Bank. I think for many people who have visited the West Bank, it's been very clear. Israel has also contributed much to make life in the West Bank easier. And with respect to Gaza and Hamas have been in a state of war with Israel for the past few years. They continue, even until recently, to launch rockets into civilian areas. So the question is, are they, as part of this agreement, going to renounce it? Ultimately, the world has issued, quite a few years ago, to the Hamas some very simple conditions in order to enable negotiations: renounce violence, accept previous agreements, and recognize Israel. If the new government, the joint government, is going to accept these parameters, then certainly there's basis for cooperation.
Do you see that happening?
I don't know. As I said, I think we should definitely give them the benefit of the doubt, but we should also be very clear on what the parameters should be. I'd also like to add about Prime Minister Fayyad. If he's not going to be there, they're going to have to come up with someone quite extraordinary to be the prime minister, because he's done so much to really establish the basis of a Palestinian state. I mean, he's really gone in a very different direction than Palestinian leaders have gone in the past. Not the direction of resistance, not looking at what Israel does, but actually working to build their own state. In many ways, this is the Zionist spirit that has created the state of Israel, focusing on building your own state, the infrastructure. If he goes away, the world community that contributes a lot of money to the ongoing operations of the Palestinian Authority is really going to wonder how the money is going to be dispersed, and whether to continue to give that money if they can no longer be sure that it is properly managed.
So, just a quick, Einat Wilf, are you singing from the same hymn sheet as Silvan Shalom?
In Israel, nobody sings from the same hymn sheet always. But in general, one should know, really. I mean, there's a lot of discussion of this declaration in September of the General Assembly. First of all, listen to the words of Foreign Minister Alain Juppé. He said that France will have to decide in September. That's pretty much stating the obvious. Yes, everyone will have to decide in September. So, yes, and that's one of the way of kind of playing the diplomatic and foreign policy game. But ultimately, the vote in September and the desire of the Palestinians to see a declaration by the UN General Assembly of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, it's a symbolic element. It does not create a state. A state is created through several steps. First, negotiations with Israel. If the Palestinians want to have a real state, if they want to have the pizza, they actually have to negotiate with Israel. The UN General Assembly, that will be an element of sympathy, clearly, perhaps a symbolic victory, but an actual state, a people who actually wants a state rather than declarations in the UN, typically behaves very differently and actually negotiates even if they are not very favorable to the government. The other thing is also, even if the General Assembly declares a state, the Palestinians so far have been very careful, and Abu Mazen has also said that in Newsweek, that they themselves will not declare the state. The UN General Assembly can do so, say that it would recognize such a state once it's created, but the Palestinians have been very careful to say that they themselves would not declare it, because they know that as soon as they declare it, not the UN General Assembly, it constitutes a unilateral step, which pretty much kills all the existing agreements between Israel and the Palestinians, and it opens the way also for Israel to take some unilateral steps. And ultimately, this is not what any of us want. We want a negotiated agreement, and yes, it will require tough decisions from Israelis, from Palestinians. No one is enthusiastic about making those tough decisions, but it's the only way to get an actual state rather than a nice declaration in New York.